Your
There you
computer,
go.
your computer will get very clogged up very quickly, I think.
There you go.
Thank you, Phelim. So without further ado, I think we'll kick off into the presentations. We're hoping, we're planning to finish at 9 o'clock, an hour and a half. But if the discussion is good at the end, you can stay on and you can chat to us, whatever, and people can drift in and out, obviously, because we are virtual as well. Okay, so to start off tonight, we have Nuala O'Sullivan. And Nuala O'Sullivan is a sports psychologist, accredited sport and exercise psychologist. And she's going to be looking at the anxieties that coaches and athletes, especially athletes, are going to be facing in return to sport. The COVID-19 pandemic has led to a wide scale disruption of sporting trajectories for 2020 and the beginning of 2021. Returning to sport for athletes and coaches can bring about a mixture of emotions. Having an awareness of the difficulties that some athletes may have is important to support them. So without further ado, I'll hand you over to Nuala.
Excellent. Hello, everyone, and welcome. I'm just going to share my screen here, and then we will get started as well. So, a second now. So today's talk, or this evening's talk, is looking at returning to sport and supporting our athletes as well. I just make this screen small here so everybody can see it. I suppose with COVID-19, as John has said there, it has led to a wide-scale disruption of our sporting trajectories for the majority of 2020 and the start of 2021 as well. And for those of us who identify sport and sport competition as a key part of their identity, COVID might have been a very difficult time for them as well. So when we look at this unprecedented situation, it means that evidence and research from similar or related contexts isn't available. So we're looking at the most recent research, we're looking at the most relevant theories needed to generalize to COVID-19 and all its challenges as well from a psychological point of view. When we look at the most recent research, it highlights how the lockdown has created a lot of uncertainty and a lot of stress. And with sport practice and the future return to competition as well, the research is showing that it may have increased athletes' anxiety and impaired motivation as well. So when we look at the most recent research that was published in January of this year, it showed that higher levels of anxiety were seen more in females, in younger athletes, in athletes practicing and competing at the highest level, and athletes without a training program during the lockdown as well. We can see from this research as well that lower motivation is seen for older athletes, experts who are practicing for more than 10 years, athletes practicing and competing at a lower level, and athletes without a training program during the lockdown as well. And additionally, participants who were injured during this time at the start of lockdown reported higher scores of cognitive anxiety. So cognitive anxiety is more the mental component, somatic anxiety is more the physiological. So cognitive would be negative self-talk and worries about performance. So they experience more cognitive anxiety to return to sport than non-injured athletes. However, interestingly enough, in this research, it found that any athletes who had a training program during the lockdown seemed to be less anxious and more self-determined to return to sport after the lockdown. Now, this is just the most up-to-date research. So as we go along, it might be changed as well. But if your athlete falls into any of these groups and you're wondering, what can we do to support our athletes and support ourselves? That's what the rest of these 9 minutes is going to cover. So what can an athlete do? So when we look at athletes, we can see with the return of sport that if athletes have already worked on their psychological skills, or if they're looking at the mental skills of their performance or looking at psychology, and they've practiced the mental aspect of their performance, that they can pull on these skills now. And it's about bringing an awareness of their repertoire of psychological skills, and the ability to use them across different contexts is highly important and beneficial for athletes now. But for the athlete who hasn't invested in psychological skills, it's good as time as ever to start. And there's a range of tools that can be used. So within the world of sport, we've all heard the saying, control the controllables, and now is more important than ever because loss of control is a major source of anxiety in the pandemic. But if we can develop autonomy and a sense of control, it's a key part to feeling safe and secure. So we recommend that athletes prioritize strategies that cope with what is within their control. So focus on emotional regulation techniques such as focusing in on their breath work, focusing on relaxing imagery, cognitive reappraisal. So what we mean by cognitive reappraisal is reframing the way that we think, trying to reframe that negative thinking into more positive thinking, engaging in mindfulness, meditation. Really essential as well is that they start creating routines as well and having self-compassion as well. We're just in the middle of a pandemic as well. So really focusing, number one, on controlling the controllables. What can I control in this scenario as well? The second thing that an athlete can do and is absolutely essential, and this isn't just for an athlete, this is for coaches as well, readjust and reframe goals. As we look to the future, you may want to also think about some time to define or redefine your mastery goals. So mastery goals are those that focus on self-improvement. So come back to that controlling the controllables, getting better at a skill, getting fitter, focusing on your nutrition. These all maintain motivation and they can provide a sense of purpose as we move along. But it's important that we're looking at the process as well. So step by step, not too far in the future, focusing on what we can control now. And even a simple review of your goal settings through looking at the 5R cycle. So just getting athletes to reflect, where am I? Reevaluate, what could I be doing even better? Review, what mastery goals will help me? Revise, what does my new plan look like? And record, write them down. So really important that for an athlete, they control the controllables, what's within their control, and they go about setting goals as well. So as a coach, how can I cope? So the role of the coach extends far beyond this simplistic perspective of bringing a team to victory. It also involves a lot of different aspects as well. You have organizational duties, you developing and managing relationships, whether that's with sponsors, supporters, families, managing budgets, management of yourself, and also trying to deliver positive results in the arena of play as well. This can lead to a lot of stress. It can impact a coach's well-being and it can bring about heightened emotions. And when we look at the research, a lot of the research shows that coaches use avoid coping strategies, and they're all too commonplace for sport coaches at every level. And worryingly though, these avoiding coping strategies are linked to long-term departure from the sport. So you need to ask yourself, have I got coping strategies in place for when I'm dealing with all this stress? Or am I just doing this avoiding of it and just hoping that, I get a breather at some stage? So as a coach, again, going back to what we said with the athlete, controlling what you can control, focusing on setting goals. Preparation is paramount in helping to reduce pressure, prepare both mentally and physically, and even just arriving at an event early with plenty of time so you can avoid stressors as well. So as I was saying earlier on, goal setting, focusing on the task at hand rather than in the outcome as well. So staying present in the moment and avoid thinking way too far ahead, focus on the process as well. So looking at reframing your goals and readjusting them. One of the biggest things, and this would take a whole night to talk about, but we need to be aware of our cognitive distortions. So cognitive distortions are distortions in the way that we think. So a lot of the time our brains are lazy, as powerful as an organ as it is, and it'll take shortcuts. And I always say to people, don't always believe everything that you think. And we have many cognitive distortions up to 60, but one of them is called catastrophizing, where we make a lot of things a lot bigger than what they are. So making mountains out of molehills. So if you're catching yourself catastrophizing and going, oh, we'll never win, we'll never get everybody fit, we'll never be able to get back to where we were. It's about stopping and not allowing that negative thinking or that negative pattern of irrational thinking to affect you and bring about a lot of stress to you as well. We need to focus on your breath, as people will kind of think it's not important. But if you find yourself thinking negative thoughts or negative self-talk, a key aspect here is just even to focus on your breath. Focusing on your breathing rhythm will automatically pull you back into the present as well. When you're feeling anxious, when you're feeling angry, you tend to take quick, shallow breaths. And when we do this, it sends a message to your brain, causing this feedback loop, reinforcing your fight or flight response, so reinforcing your stress. It's kind of going, well, I must be stressed here. And that's why taking long, deep, calming breaths disrupts that feedback loop, and it helps you to calm down. And there's various breathing techniques that you can delve into. So it's about looking and delving a little bit more into that. And finally, for a coach, who is your support? You understand that distractions, disruptions, differences that your athletes will face on return. So looking at your support team, list them all down. What are obstacles we're going to face? One of the biggest mistakes people make in goal settings is that they don't list out what are obstacles that they're going to face. The minute you know what your obstacles are, you know what to expect, and there's no surprises or stress coming upon you as well. So what can a coach do to support athletes? Very first and not foremost, it's really important to be aware of individuals. It's important to acknowledge that athletes have diverse set of abilities, coping strategies, competencies, and some might have a lot and some might have a little. And you might be going back as a team, but you have to be able to focus on individuals and their responses as well. Also, what we can do to support athletes as a coach, build resilience. Now more than ever, resilience is our ability to bounce back after setbacks, and it's about embracing a growth mindset. Coaches play a really important part in helping their athletes develop a growth mindset, providing learning and growth-based feedback. The value of a growth mindset should be embraced by all coaches now, because we've gone through a lot of setbacks, and particularly in relation to younger athletes, in order to allow them to be open to improvement, to work hard, and for allowing them to learn from failure as well. Making mistakes is a natural part of growth, and in some youth environments, an overemphasis on winning at all costs can often send the wrong message to young athletes, and they will often find themselves then risk averse and playing safe in order to avoid mistakes. An athlete needs to learn, they need to take chances, they need to see what works and what doesn't work. So now more than ever, we need to foster a growth mindset, provide praise and feedback focused on learning and growing rather than outcomes. When providing feedback, focus on the effort your athletes have put in and the growth that they have achieved. And avoid making comparisons across your athletes, as it's a lot more beneficial for your athletes to compare their last performance with their current one. So get them to focus on surpassing their personal best rather than just winning as well. And finally, then as well, it's so important to note that we're aware of athletes' mental health. Even before COVID-19, the research is evident that mental health difficulties can lie within sporting athletes, with anxiety and depression at the forefront. So what can I do? We can support our athletes by listening and supporting them. There's many forms of social support that you can offer another person, such as sharing knowledge, practical help, emotional support, validation through role modeling. So, kind of going, do you know what? It is tough. It is hard getting back. I feel stressed. And by even keeping communication channels open and by scheduling regular connections with key individuals. So even ask yourself on the first day back, what's your plan? Is it going to be a 2-minute chat and out onto the field? Or is it going to be a more of a planned 15-minute chat that details that, you know what, we are a supportive group. Let's support each other. What supports we have in place, that as coaches, you know exactly where to signpost if needs be. So to finish up, one of the things I notice as a sports psychologist, when we talk about mental health with coaches and backroom teams, the amount of times I've heard, I don't know how to support. I don't know what to say to an athlete if they come to me and saying that they feel anxious. I don't have the knowledge. And it was from this, when we see athletes link in with sporting management and background team to help support them. However, the information on how to help and support these athletes is not always there. So from that, I created a Champion Mental Health in Sport workshop. It's delivered to over 200 coaches, some with a clear local sports partnership to all coaches across the world in the World Association of Kickboxing. And what it does, it just provides you with an in-depth knowledge on the signs and symptoms of specific mental health illness within sport, the relevant treatments, and most importantly, a communication framework, because sometimes we might find it difficult, and this talk provides a communication framework of how to start the conversation on mental health and where to signpost and facilitate. And also it helps coaches and staff to support their own mental health too as well. So thanks very much, and I'll send it back to you, John.
Thanks so much, Nullig. And if you want to get in touch with Nullig, her details are there, but it's at myperformance.ie, so info@myperformance.ie. Thank you so much. Can I just ask everybody just to make sure your video is turned off as well, apart from the speakers? If everybody else could make sure their video is turned off, thanks. So we'll move on without much delay. And I should also say again, for those of you that came in late, thanks a million for coming in. If you want to ask questions, throw it in the chat function at the bottom middle of the screen, and we'll answer the questions at the end, because we want to get through all the speakers first of all. So next on the agenda then is Phelim Mackin, and Phelim is the coordinator of Limerick Sports Partnership, but Phelim is also a highly experienced coach education tutor, and especially around things around this idea, if you've heard of physical literacy and fundamental movement skills and fundamentals of movement. And Phelim actually sits on national committees and national think tanks around these ideas, developing policies within Sport Ireland. So Phelim's going to talk about highlighting the importance of multi-skills jigsaw around the fundamentals of movement, fundamental movement skills, and sport-specific skills in returning to sport from a fitness perspective.
Okay, everybody, thank you very much. Just somebody give me a thumbs up there that you can see the presentation and you can hear me.
Yep, all good here, Phelim.
Excellent. So obviously we're very aware that, we're only able to cover a number of sports this evening. So a lot of what we're talking about really is fairly broad, but it will have connectivity to a lot of sports and a lot of the messaging that we're hoping people can take away. And I suppose the purpose of this session really is to get coaches and club officials to be very aware of the starting base that some of our players and athletes will be coming from when they're now coming back onto the fields over the next couple of weeks. And I think, the I Coach Kids platform that we work closely with have a number of these, what they call coaching hack statements, in relation to how best to support and coach our young people. And this one I think is very relevant for this talk this evening, which is that, if we turn up the oven temperature, it won't bake the cake any faster, but it'll actually burn it. And the same is going to apply now to our players and athletes as they return to play. And the key message really is that we don't try and start making up for what we perceive as lost time. We will have had a number of players and athletes that would have engaged in competitions last year in 2020, but it was a little bit different than, say, the 2018, 2019 seasons in relation to pre-season, competition time, level of engagement, etc. And there would have been a lot of disruptions. So that's our starting point. And 2021 is going to be the same. Ultimately, we have to very much focus on these kind of key elements here that, as Nullig also mentioned, we need to bring the children and players and athletes back into a fun and enjoyable environment. We know they want to be with their friends. We're very conscious of what, the various lockdowns would have done. And, we also know that kids want to be involved in sport like their parents. But crucially for me, the next two are really, really important. That, fun and enjoyment is really important, and we're very mindful of that in our coaching sessions. But we're also very aware that kids want to learn new skills, and kids want to feel competent, you know, in their sports. And that's our key message. So when we're bringing these athletes back now over the next few weeks, these are the 5 key things that we should be prioritizing. If unfortunately we get into this catch-up space, you know, then it becomes very serious and adult-like. You know, Nolig also mentioned around the emphasis on winning. We have to be mindful of that and, you know, ensure that that is not something that becomes a barrier in relation to their development. And then finally, the internal competition and favorites, pushy coaches, etc. And then if the kids, as a result of all of that, have low confidence, and that's why they leave our sports. So we now have a big challenge in ensuring, as Nolig said, getting a lot of the children back. And when we do get them back, that we create an environment where they stay, you know, and that's going to be a crucial process for ourselves as coaching units. And that's why that planning piece, as mentioned by Nolig as well, is going to be so important, that we have a plan in relation to how we're going to deliver the next couple of months for those young people. When we go further, we have to remember as well that most injuries occur from doing too much too fast after doing too little for too long. And the too little for too long is something that we as coaches and practitioners now are going to have to be crucially mindful of in relation to their engagement. And I think, you know, we have seen experiences from different young people that have, you know, engaged in different kind of personal challenges set by their clubs, set by their schools, and set by the various sports partnerships across the country. But not everybody engaged in that space. We're going to have the same experience as well in relation to young people that have logged on to Zoom fitness programs. And again, attendance levels will be sporadic in relation to that, and there will be a cohort of young players that will be in front of you that may not have logged on to any of those. So we got to take the process slow. We got to make it fun. And depending on your sport, we really have to ensure that the ball is crucial in all those sessions. So that running, fitness drills, etc., is really minimized. And that, as you will hear from the speakers later on, you know, using the games as that tool to improve their fitness. You know, kids want to learn. Kids want to be challenged, so positively challenge them in your sessions. And then crucially, be very inclusive and be mindful of, you know, you may need additional coaches and supports because you're going to have to maybe break up the sessions because some of the children may have gone back in their skills, other kids may have advanced in their skills, depending on how they coped during the various lockdown phases. So you need to facilitate that. And crucially, for a lot of the kids, we got to allow that time for that chat piece, that connection piece that for a lot of the children that have been isolated is going to be a very important time for them. But we can't really start panicking now because we think we have a lot of content to cover, so there's no time for chat. We got to facilitate that, you know. So that's why these next 4 points are really in red, which is that we don't try and think we have to catch up because of what we lost in 2020. You know, we don't get over concerned about fitness and running, that we build it into our games and our sports, because ultimately that's what they're back for, and that's why they've come. Again, you know, Dennis is going to talk later on about let the game be the coach. So let the activities happen and let the kids learn in that space. And then crucially, we need to take the intense level out of it because we've had a lot of negativity. We need to be creating these really positive sporting environments that we know the kids are going to come back to week in, week out. Okay. We also then want to look at, you know, how we know our players and athletes. It's that huge connection piece. And, you know, Lee Moggan has probably been one of the crucial coach educators across all our platforms over the last number of years. And one of his key phrases was always that if you want to coach a sport to children, you have to know the sport, but more importantly, you have to know the child. So we need to know where they're coming from. We need to know where they're going to be in their development. We need to know that we can make a connection with them when they come to our sessions. And crucially, we need them to come back. And that's that piece where we need to see the players and athletes more than just players and athletes. We see them as the person first, and we make that connection with them. And that's why, you know, when we do the Coaching Children courses that myself and Mairead Fitzgerald roll out in relation to Limerick Sports Partnership, you know, this is one of our crucial slides in some of the workshops where we're very mindful in our coaching that we have activities that covers the physical, the technical, the tactical, and the mental. But crucially in the center that we need to plan for the personal and social. Don't just assume it happens because we're in sport. We got to plan for that and how we make that connection piece and how we introduce the kids. So it can be something as simple as when they arrive for the training, if you know when birthdays are coming up, etc., that you make the time to recognize that. It might be asking how everyone's getting on in school and that return to school, etc. And it's that, again, reinforcing that connection piece. So that's going to be important over the next few months. So I'm going to show you this, but it's really how we use the C system in relation to our coaching. And this C system is based on this model of from a deficit reduction view of psychology to strength and potential understanding of the human development. And what that means is looking at focus on what people actually can do. So children and youth are resources to be developed and not problems to be managed. And we do that by using this very simple system here, and hopefully they'll all come in at the same time. And it goes back to some of those points as well at the start, where we had an understanding of why children stay in sport, and being competent is crucial. So in order for us to ensure they are competent, we need to pitch activities at their levels, okay? We need to work on their confidence. We need to create a fun and welcoming environment, and that's that connection piece. And we need to build character, and that's our respect for teammates, opponents, referees, etc. And then, you know, that caring element, which is so important for young people presenting to coaches, is that see the person, not just an athlete, and make that connection. And then we facilitate that creativity where we use guided discovery through games, etc. And the lads will cover that a little bit more. And if we're just as coaches are really mindful of that, this is going to be really important in re-engaging people in our sports after the various lockdowns, okay? So for me, the key message here around the physical literacy and the multi-skill jigsaw is that in order to be very proficient at sport-specific skills and tactics, we need to build the foundations. And the foundations are the fundamentals of movement, the fundamental movement skills, and the fundamental game skills. And we have to be mindful in our practices that elements of these may have deteriorated over time, and they may not have had the same element of focus during the various lockdowns and the various reintroduction to sport and physical activity. So we have to plan for that in our sessions. And we're looking at this under these key pointers. So the key fundamentals of movement is our agility, balance, coordination, and speed. So we need to facilitate those in our training sessions. And that may and may not be done with the ball or whatever is used in your sport, but we got to get that balance right. And that going straight away back into our sport-specific skills may not allow for that development. We will also have athletes and players that will have gone through various maturation stages as well, which means that their general agility, balance, and coordination may have been slightly knocked back a bit because now they're growing to this new body for themselves. Their limbs are getting longer, but they don't have the muscle growth yet to be able to control those limbs efficiently. So we need to be mindful of that in our sessions. So it's how we plan, how we observe what's happening in front of us. And then, as I mentioned earlier, that additional coaching support and how we bring that in to help our players and athletes to try and get them back to their potential self in relation to before they went through any of these phases of lockdown, etc. So it's a really important phase that our sport-specific skills and tactics are obviously very important, but we need to have the foundations to be able to achieve those. And this slide really kind of highlights that. So the fundamental of movement are combinations that produce a specific movement. So kick, throw, and jump, okay? But in order to be proficient at that, we must have good agility, balance, and coordination, and then speed in relation to the time that we do that. So this is our jigsaw, you know? And if we ensure that we cover these as best we can across our training programs, then we have the building blocks for safe and efficient movement, okay? And then just for the last few slides here is that when we are looking at simple things like balance in our activities, we're looking at, you know, counterbalance activities, we're looking at changing center of gravity, we're looking at the base of support in relation to how the balance can, especially in our contact sports, when we do get into contact, probably in May, June time. And then core strength. Some young people will definitely have worked on these elements a little bit during lockdown, but as I mentioned earlier, others may not have done so. So we need to factor those in to our activities. In relation to coordination, again, if we have young people that have gone through growth spurts, etc., this will become a challenge. If we have people playing in a very technical sport, they may have kind of gone back a little bit in relation to their, even things like the kinematic chain, which is the connectivity of everything. And a simple way of explaining kinematic chain is if you're doing an overhead serve in tennis, we need everything from our ankle all the way to our wrist to be in time in order for us to perfect a perfect overhead serve. And you look at that then in relation to a lot of our sports where there is striking, throwing, catching, etc. coming into it. And that mental organization in our brains to get back, that it becomes instinctive. But we need a little bit of time on that. So again, we don't rush this process. We allow the time for them to develop this. And then finally, our agility and speed, stop-start efficiency is going to be so important. Accelerating, de-accelerating, change of direction, etc., change of speed, and then change in planes, you know. These things are not going to automatically just happen the minute we go back onto our pitches. So our activities should mirror this, in that how we want to get those kind of movements in and see them developed in proficiently over time. And then finally, I suppose, the key points for me to take away is that gradual piece. We look at that. We don't start getting ahead of ourselves in relation to timetables, competitions, etc. We get the players ready as best we can, being mindful of the growth spurts and the maturation that will have happened. Change in age groups in some of our sports. So example, you know, if we look at the GAA where they've now changed their age groups, and that will impact for some young people, that we have some younger people now being involved in championship type competitions that previously would not have been for another year. We need to be able to manage the variety in fitness levels because that will be a reality. Some will have had very good access in relation to Zoom. Some of them will have really engaged in that process, and others will not. So we need to be mindful of that. And another crucial one is going to be the change in surface. You know, people that might have been doing a lot of work on their gardens and lawns, etc., you know, where if they're all in the Peter O'Mahony school of during lockdown looking at his manicured lawns, then the pitch is not going to be like that. Not all the pitches. So we got to be mindful of that change of surface and that stability piece, that ankle piece, that balance piece, and how that's going to be, I suppose, efficient for that safe and efficient movement. And then the progression to contact, that's going to be important. And some people will be ready quicker than others, and others will not. And we have to ensure that your sessions are preparing for that over time. And then for me, in the team sports and the game-based sports, using the games in that condition manner that the lads are going to cover coming up to be a lot of how we improve our fitness. Okay. And then finally, for us, it's again in relation to the I Coach Kids that they have this pledge And I think we as coaches, if we can stick to those as best we can, to be very much child-centered, be a holistic coach. So that's that social and personal piece as well. Make sure it's in the sessions, be inclusive, make it fun and safe, prioritize the love for sport above learning the sport, you know. So that's a very, very important point, that if it becomes a task, or if it becomes an effort to be in that sport because it's more learning and challenging and we're not enjoying it, then we may not retain the players. Focus on the foundational skills, absolutely, so crucial, that we get them to be able to do those skills initially, and then plan progressive programs as a consequence. And then using different methods to enhance learning, and the guys are going to cover that in their presentations. And then, you know, how do we use competition? And for me, it's in that development. It's not about winning at the various age groups underage. It's about how do we develop and retain our players and athletes up through the systems. So thank you for listening. And if you have any questions, put them into the chat and we'll cover them later on. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Phelim. Some very valuable insights there. And again, for those of you that are interested, if you go to limericksports.ie, they run the Coaching Children program, and we'll in claresports.ie, we'll be running it later on in the year as well. And it's a well worth program to do. It takes a bit of time, but it's actually really good. It goes into in depth in a lot of that. Magella, I see your hand raised. If you put your comment into the chat, we'll address that afterwards. Okay.
Sorry, is the chat disabled?
Oh, sorry. Phelim, can you check that on your side? You're hosting. Phelim? Hello?
Yes, I'm just checking there.
Sorry.
Yeah, no, the chat is there.
Magella, I'll send you a chat here.
Yeah, Dennis just typed something in there now.
Oh yeah.
Sorry, it's just coming up as chat disabled. I can't type. Anyway, not to worry. That's fine. Okay, thanks.
Magella, if you hold your question, we'll come in at the end. Is that
sure.
okay?
Okay, no problem.
Okay.
Thanks.
Okay, so I just want to move on now to Lily-Anne O'Hora from Athletics Ireland, and Lily-Anne's going to be talking about a coach's survival guide to coaching teenage girls. As you return to training and are faced with the intricacies of non-contact outdoor training, you may feel more pressure than ever before when coaching. Her presentation will help you develop simple and effective ways to reconnect with your teenage players and athletes, whilst ensuring the group needs and wants are catered for. And as we know, teenage girls, they have different challenges, or different challenges, if that's the right word, when we're coaching them. So I'll bring Lily-Anne into the conversation. She's the Women in Sport Officer with Athletics Ireland. So thanks a million, Lily-Anne.
Thanks, John. Thanks, Phelim. So, hi guys. Like I said, I'm Lily-Anne O'Hora. I'm working within Athletics Ireland as the Women's Sport Officer. Limerick born and bred, and involved in Dooneen Athletic Clubs, which is thankfully why I'm still here today. But I suppose the purpose of my presentation was to make your life that little bit easier as coaches, because let's be honest, us girls, we're funny characters, but teenage girls, we're even funnier. So this presentation is simply going to allow you to understand your athletes a little bit better. And as John mentioned, teenage girls, they have different needs, they have different wants, different desires, but most importantly, they all have different experiences of both sport and physical activity. And because of COVID, unfortunately at the moment, some are disengaged, some are completely uninspired by sport. But then on the other spectrum, you have lots that are very passionate about sport and physical activity. And then you have some serious competitors who are ready to rock. But the great thing about sport, I suppose, at the moment is that it's one of the very few social spaces that teenagers can actually reconnect. So again, as coaches, just to be mindful that we create a space that athletes and players feel valued, included and wanted. So when I was doing this presentation, I didn't want to just throw out a load of research at the coaches. I actually genuinely wanted to reflect what the girls themselves are saying. Thankfully, I have a few cousins and a few neighbours who were involved in sport in Limerick, Tipperary and Clare, would you believe? All at varying levels and all at very different sports and so on. So again, the overall finding from the research was that the girls just want to be back. They want to be back with their friends, and most importantly, they want to be back together. So out of 35 girls, 31 responded, or sorry, 31 came back and said that they're really looking forward to returning to training. 2, unfortunately, are a bit unsure, and 2 aren't really looking forward to it. And some of those ideas of maybe why they're not will come up later on in the presentation. So what they said they're looking forward to most was just, again, being with their friends, being competitive again, and playing and getting fit. And again, they have that appreciation for sport, and they know how much it can offer them, not just socially, but mentally, physically, and psychosocially as well. And again, everything that's on my screen, these words in brackets, they're all from the girls themselves. But what they're not looking forward to is an overemphasis on fitness. They are very conscious that the effects of social distancing and having to adhere to all the guidelines might prevent them from playing the sports in which they normally would in the way they do, but also trying to relearn how they balance training and life and their social life again. So again, they just want to be able to play. But COVID or no COVID, these are the 5 anchors that are really, really important in a teenager's life. And the most important thing is that this all research has actually been gathered and captured by Sport Ireland. And if any of you aren't aware of the research, I'd recommend downloading the piece of research that they did, because it really, really highlights the barriers and the experiences of teenagers within Ireland, both in an urban capacity, but in a rural capacity too. So again, you mightn't be surprised with some of the results that will come out. But number 1, the support network. And this is where girls, they prioritize time with their friends above absolutely everything else. Because you know what? It gives them a stronger sense of themselves and also a place in the world. Teenage girls also want to have independence and opportunity. They want to make their own choices, and they want to be free to do so. But also socially connected. They want to be involved in the virtual space as well. And they're very conscious of other people's opinions and who inspires them, and those sort of things as well. Moments of pride, and again, this is something that they really take to heart, but most importantly, from a sport and physical activity point of view, they really see the value of being involved, not just for their physical health, but for their overall well-being. And they know that it builds their self-esteem, but also their self-worth. And then this is definitely something we can all relate to, keeping on top of it all. And that's a big challenge for teenagers, because they're going through a period of time where they feel completely misunderstood. They a time of unprecedented change, and even in COVID it's even more chaotic. But also as they try to juggle school, social life, friends, and conflict, and so on. So these are just a few things that keep girls going, or maybe prevents them from getting involved, but also can be used as opportunities to get them involved in sport. So then we asked the girls themselves, what advice would they give to their coaches on the return to sport? And like I said, these are their words, not mine. I wouldn't say bad language like this. But what they've said is they don't want to just be running the out of us when they go back. They don't want it to be too hard. They want everyone to have a chance and an opportunity. They don't want to be screamed at, and they don't want it to be too serious. And also to have a lot of challenges and a lot of different components to their sessions. And even though Cyndi Lauper said girls want to have fun, they don't just want to have fun. And again, this is taken from the research from Sport Ireland. And again, in order to engage, to retain our teenagers in sport, these are the 8 principles that can guide you to do so. So again, taking the pressure off performance. Does your club facilitate potential, participation, and performance? And that's a big barrier to why girls will either get involved in your sport or get involved in your club. And especially in terms of traditional sports, the big sports, for example, there's very strict competitive pathways, and that can be seen as a barrier to get involved, as they'll say, I'm not fit enough, or I'm not sporty enough. And again, this will drive them away from the sport. So again, it's just allowing you as a coach, but also as a club, to give girls that social space and that social offering. And again, measure that accessibility within your club. Invoke excitement. Variety is the spice of life with girls. They don't want the same ding dong all the time. So again, provide adventurous opportunities. And even if you're in an individual sport, bring a team dynamic to it to spice things up a little and give them more to realize that it's not just them in the world, and that they've great people around them that will help them reach their potential and maybe performance down the line. Clear emotional reward. Girls don't like being complimented for the sake of being complimented. They're very critical creatures, and in a sense that they know if something is just being said for the sake of it, versus if something is being said with intent and a genuine meaning. So again, it's trying to reframe achievements to be actually seen as moments of pride, and again facilitating opportunities that do that, and Nola spoke about that earlier, and this allows them to increase their confidence and again increase their personal growth. So allow them to have their own individual challenges, give them credible rewards, such as, you know, most team spirit involved, most improved rather than best player, and so on. Open their eyes to what's there. And I think this is really important as well, because the traditional sports tend to dominate the sport and physical activity, but again, let your sessions be an opportunity to try other sports, and especially now because of some of the restrictions that are in place, this might be something that you are forced to do. But ask yourself as a coach, what does success look like to you? Is it having a magnificent under 14 fail a team that are the bee's knees and the cat's pajamas? Or is success meeting those girls at the age of 17 coming down the street saying, yeah, I'm still involved in sport. It mightn't be your sport, but to see them still involved, I think would be a major success. And building into the existing habits of their things, because as well, they live in the virtual world, they live in the real world, but let's be honest, they also live in their own world. So again, it's about recognizing, reinforcing and celebrating sport and physical activity through different forms, through social media, and again, this increases that social offering. And if I'm completely honest, the primary school that I went to as a child, all my friends in school signed up to the local running club just so that they could get the hoodies, the Duneen Athletic hoodies, because again, it was something cool, it was something to be a part of. But again, they're all motivated by different things. Give girls a voice and a choice. And again, this is something that girls, they want to be empowered, they wanted to be liberated. But as a coach, don't be afraid to sit back and give them the ownership to govern their sport and the game and the way they want to play, and allow them to lead each other and not them just themselves. So again, I think Nola and Phelim said that again, you don't have to come in with a big plan. They'll probably know what they want themselves. Champion what's in it for them, realizing that sport can give them so much more than just fast times and medals, the life skills they learn, the relationships and the confidence and so on. And again, expanding the image, number 8, of what sport looks like. Sport comes in all shapes and sizes, and that's something that I think young girls really struggle with and really need to be aware of. So again, bring in role models from every aspect of sport and physical activity, and let them see that for themselves that it's not a one size fits all. So my advice to you just going forward would just be to know your athletes. Again, what do they want? And especially as they return from the most recent lockdown, the goals and the ideas that they had originally might have shifted completely. So how do you find this out? Do you question them? Do you send out surveys? Do you have a review with your athletes every 3 or 4 weeks to see what they want? And again, they want to be included in these conversations. Fun and friendship. And as Phelim said, do you make time as a coach for purposeful bonding and social activity? When do you schedule it in? Do they take the cool down, or are they allowed to come up with a 10-minute task within the session that they feel empowered to do so and lead? And again, healthy competition in another thing. Set group challenges that they have to work together, mini leagues and prizes and awards for participation. And then again, like we said, the athlete player and voice. Do you have a place for athlete and player feedback and discussion? Does one person always feedback from the group about how the team are feeling? Do you ask them individually, one-to-one and so on? But again, it's just having those clear channels of communication so that everyone's aligned in their goals and what they're trying to get out of being there together. Because if you know where people stand, it'll make your life a lot easier as coaches. Positive social sport. Again, we're being mindful as teenage girls that they have a lot going on that you need to cater for, and this will also allow you to tailor your delivery. There's certain times of the month as well that these girls mightn't be in any form to rock up to training, but again, let them have an opportunity to maybe just go that little bit easier at training. There's no problem with that. And purposeful encouragement. Again, this will allow them to increase their confidence, measure improvements, and give them work-ons on homeworks, because again, they want to feel like their needs are actually being catered for and that they are being identified, that they have potential to prosper whatever their level or ability may be. So again, just a final message, and again, this comes from the girls. What do you want to say to your coaches? They said, just keep it as normal as possible. obey the guidelines so that they can stay training, because simply sport's been taken away from them a long time. They're desperate to stay out on the pitch and on the track. So again, I know you'll all behave yourselves anyway, but just to be mindful of it. And this is what my favorite part was: just keep doing what you're doing. It's pretty good, and keep continuing to give it the usual support, because you know what, as coaches, you are very, very much valued, and within sport, no athlete would get anywhere without their coaches. So thank you. Thank you. And if anybody has any questions or anything, don't be afraid to put them in the chat box or reach out to me individually as well.
Thanks so much, Liliane, and that was a great insight into teenage girls. And just for the coaches that are here and clubs that are here, there is a piece of training coming down the line from Sport Ireland coaches called Girls in Sport, where like the coaching children, you can do it as an add-on to your coaching badges, and that. And it's very, very insightful. It's a very, very good piece of training, so that'll be coming down the line soon. So moving on to the next section then is we're going to be hearing from 3 of the development officers from the GA here in Clare, from Munster Rugby and from the FAI. Now we're to start with Micheál Duffy from the Clare GA. He's the games manager, but Micheál, there was just a mix-up, but he's very kindly, he has pre-recorded his presentation for us, and he's going to be talking about planning a session and warm-up. So Jess is going to share Micheál's presentation for us. Liliane, if you stop sharing, let Jess. Yeah, maybe she's a bit slow. Sorry.
Hi everyone, Micheál Duffy here with Clare GA. Apologies I wasn't able to make the call this evening live. I just got double booked with another thing that I had on. So first of all, what I'm looking at for this topic for the next 5 to 10 minutes is the planning of a session and warm-up ideas that can be done around the non-contact guidelines that we currently have from next week on. I suppose first of all, I'm delighted that we're able to go back training with kids from the 26th. I think it's really, really important for their physical health as well as the social and mental side of things, about things just returning to normal. They getting back to school was a big step, and I think this is another big step in the right direction as well. So I suppose from your point of view as a coach, the better prepared or planned you are for your sessions, the easier it's going to make things for you. So the first thing is that one of the lines I love when thinking about planning the sessions is starting with the end in sight. So when you're looking at a session, what are the aims or objectives you want to achieve in the session? So what are the skills that you'd like to cover, and then what are the coaching points of them skills that you want to get across? And then also, are you planning session to session, or are you planning a number of sessions in a block together, trying to cover an area or a skill over the course of a few sessions, or is it session to session kind of an idea? So I think a big thing with planning sessions is actually just having a clear vision in your head of what it is that, depending on the age group that you're coaching, is what skills that you'd like them to be able to do, and then how can you design your activities in order to do that in the sessions. So the big thing is having a plan and being prepared. I suppose if you remember to yourself when you were playing, you always know the coaches that were organised, on time, prepared. You knew that things were structured, and you could see, I suppose, the biggest time you notice when someone isn't prepared is when things aren't smooth and they don't run from one activity to the other nice and quickly, which results in losing time in the session. So big thing about, and it takes no skill. There's no skill involved in being prepared for a session. It's just I suppose it's a discipline thing. So I suppose one of the best coaches that probably there's ever been. I like this quote about when he's talking about preparation. John Wooden, he was a basketball coach in America. He said that confidence comes from being prepared. So the night before or lunchtime before your session, or an hour before your session, with whatever age group you're doing, is sit down, pen and paper, notebook, and just write down what you plan on doing for the hour and 15, hour and 20 minutes for your session, so that you know yourself that you're prepared and ready for the session. And other thing with that is that if you're writing stuff on sheets of paper or something like that, don't be afraid to bring what you plan on doing in the session in your pocket as well, if you'd like. And there's no shame in having a kind of a cheat sheet in your pocket, just to be able to kind of re-jog your memory when you're going from activity to activity. So there's nothing wrong with that either. Another thing with planning sessions is to be comfortable and flexible with how a session is going. So sometimes you might come across an activity that the kids really like, and sometimes going with the flow isn't necessarily the worst thing in the world. So in your plan that you sat down the day before or the few hours before the session that you wanted to do, but then all of a sudden you only wanted to do it for 10 minutes, but you're seeing that the kids are really enjoying it, there's nothing wrong with letting that extend to 15-20 minutes. If it is working out, just go with the flow. Having a plan is important, but then also being able to go away from the plan at times is also important as well. Similarly, then I suppose on the other side of that, if things aren't going as well or aren't going as smoothly, it's never a bad idea to have one or two kind of backup ideas in your mind of if a game or a drill runs a bit quicker than you expected it to, and it kind of has got to its end, having a backup idea that you're able to kind of spring out whenever it's needed is always a good thing to have. I suppose the other thing then with your planning is how long should you be doing per activity. I suppose the simple answer is it depends on the activity, it depends what you're doing. Biggest thing I noticed last time around, last September when we went back coaching in primary schools, was that because kids hadn't done a lot of team or collective training, because of the lockdown, you were noticing that they might have been getting a little bit tired a little bit quicker than normal. So I suppose my barometer for this, whenever I'm trying to judge how long an activity goes for, is, I suppose, first of all, is how long it takes them before they get tired, and then the second they start getting tired, you give them a little break to get their breath back. Or another kind of good gauge for this is the second you see the interest kind of seeming to drop a little bit, so they might start chatting to each other or getting a little bit distracted, and it might be a good time to take a little break and trying to refocus then. So another line I really like is the only KPI that matters is to keep people involved. So KPIs in business are key performance indicators, or they're done with stats with inter-county teams. When you're dealing with participation level sport, the only thing that really matters is trying to keep as many people playing as possible for as long as possible. When you're planning your sessions then as well, if you're looking at the coaching points of the skills, so you've started with the end in sight, you know what skills you want to work on in the session, and then the next thing you need to do as a coach is to figure out, okay, what are the key coaching points or the key messages that I want the players to get at the end, or after in the session or after the session. So another thing then on top of that is having questions thought out for these key coaching points. So instead of just telling players all the time the coaching points, is can you think of ways to be able to ask the questions to be able to find it out off of them? So say for example, if you're doing a solo in football, instead of telling the child to point their toe up towards their nose, if you're just planning your session, you could be thinking about, okay, what is the question I should have? Okay, which way does your toe point when you're trying to solo? And next one then is, one of the things I also like to do is giving players a little bit of a choice at the end of a session. So it also helps with trying to figure out what skills they'd like to work on, but also that you're able to give them a choice, and then when you give them a choice and they give feedback, and then you do it the next time around, the next time you ask them to give them choices, then they'll be more forward in trying to say what they would like to do and going forward. And then I suppose when you're coaching a group of kids, the most important thing is that it's 100% of the kids 100% of the time, so that everyone is involved in the session for as much of the session as possible. And then another line I met at a conference, I think it was Liam Morgan, when he was talking about the coach, was that whatever you do, be you. So every coach has their own specific qualities and traits, and I suppose the biggest thing with whichever group you are with is to try and be yourself, and try not to forget that ever. So just moving on to then what you can do in the warm-up. So I suppose the first thing about a warm-up is all it is to prepare the players for the session ahead. For kids, you're generally just looking at trying to incorporate fundamental movement skills, elemental movement skills into it, just to get the kids moving, getting their heart rate up a small bit, and starting off the session. So you can do this with multiple different ways. So like obstacle courses are generally good ways to do this. Relay races, getting the players to design an obstacle course or pick the different types of movements. So all the different types of animal movements, they'll know this stuff from school anyway. So you can get 4 or 5 kids to pick out a movement each, and they do it for 20-30 seconds, just to get them moving. I suppose what you're looking at then for older kids then, or teenagers, when you're looking to get them warmed up, is that you want to make sure that they get their stretches done so that they're ready to prepared for the session. So they're dynamic stretches for all their lower body muscles and upper body muscles. And then I suppose when you're trying to do warm-ups, I like to make sure that you're incorporating the ball as much as possible. So can you design your warm-up activities around passing, shooting, controlling exercises, just to have the ball involved in the warm-up as well, if you can at all. And then I suppose the other thing is then with the warm-up is that it doesn't need to be overly structured. Sometimes people think that just because there's loads of cones and everything is lined out lovely, that it's more structured. Team sports are all about chaos and being able to manage in chaotic environments. So if players are constantly in situations where they're told to go from here to here to here, rather than being able to make that decisions themselves, I think incorporating a bit of chaos into warm-ups sometimes is a good idea as well. So quickly, just to finish up, just to give you a few kind of non-contact warm-up ideas that you could do with your teams going back with next week. So kids love different types of variations of tag to work on agility. If you have softballs or bean bags or something that you're able to do throwing tag, where you, instead of trying to tag someone physically, you throw the softball at them. If you hit them, then they're on. Hand passing tag, similar kind of thing. If you have a slitter or a football, just make sure that the ball isn't too hard, it doesn't hurt anyone, but you could say hand passing instead of a throwing. Another one I like to do is bib tag. So like very similar to tag rugby, players could have their bibs tucked into their shorts, and they're basically trying to keep their bib from being taken off by whoever is on. And if you get caught, then you become the catcher, and the game just keeps going on then. I suppose big thing then is when you're doing any sort of activity is trying to gamify it as much as you can. So children, adults, we're all naturally competitive, so trying to make things a bit more competitive in your sessions, and trying to figure out what works best for your team in order to do that. You have 4 types of competition, so me versus me, where you're trying to beat your previous score; me versus you, where you've got different kids trying to beat each other; you versus us versus them, where it's one team against another team; and then it's another us versus us, where a team is working together to try and beat the score that they got in the previous game. And then I suppose other type of non-contact games that are similar to matches, but work in a non-contact way. So similar to the bib tag game, bibs tucked into the shorts, rather than tackling for the ball. If someone takes the bib off you, you get possession back. Other ones then Olympic handball, so player can't run with the ball while it's in their hand, but the other team can't tackle them. If the ball hits the ground, the other team gets it back, that kind of an idea. Dodgeball, kids can't get enough of dodgeball, they love it. Really good for throwing, really good for catching and evasion skills. And then any type of target game, so it could be shooting for points, trying to get the ball, like if you put a slitter or a football on top of a cone, any type of kicking, throwing, hand passing, trying to knock that ball off the cone. Kids love hitting things at targets. So those are another a few quick ideas for non-contact ideas that we can do when we go back to training next week. And I wish everyone the best of luck. Thanks for listening.
Thanks for that, Michal, in a virtual sense. He as I say, couldn't be here, but that was excellent. We'll move swiftly along to Dennis Hines, and Dennis is the Regional Development Officer for Soccer for the FAI, and Dennis is along the same themes, but this is unopposed practice. So so I'll let Dennis just take it away there.
Thanks, John. Just give me the green light there that's on the screen.
Yes, that's all good, Dennis.
Yeah, okay. Thanks for staying with us, folks. We'll move this on fairly quickly. The picture, as they say, a picture paints 1,000 words. COVID really was, I suppose, a reset, not for just us in sport, but for the world and globally, maybe to reflect on ourselves and how we approach things. But from a sporting perspective, we probably went back a generation or two to these kind of scenarios where we saw the kids initially from lockdown 1 getting out there. We all saw the videos online, etc., etc. I myself even hit the roads running and walking, and the Clare Sports Partnership had their 5K podcast, etc., etc. So it was full of enthusiasm. That probably has waned a little bit. So the kids' videos have slowed down. Probably the only thing going was the Jerusalem dance. But that picture is what we are about now, folks, when youth sport comes back. Okay, the kids will have hopefully balanced that love of practice and getting out in the backyard with a ball or a hurl or anything to practice their sport. Obviously, with balancing that with the indoor, technology addiction, unfortunately, that they have. So when they come back, unfortunately, as much as we as adults, our coaches don't want to hear it, after doing our million Zoom calls and WhatsApp groups and webinars and courses and finding out all this knowledge about coaching and youth for the last 12 months, we really don't need to be around the thing as much as possible. Okay, so the kids are coming back, so we just want to let them play, try not to get in the way. So the title, we're going to look at unopposed practices. So Michal has brought us up to the end of the warm-up. We've all done our bit for charity, folks. So from now on, a little deal between us all. If you're involved in sport and you mention the word drill, please give another euro to charity every time someone mentions that word. We've already raised €2 for charity tonight from previous speakers. So our terminology, and this is about as coachy as this section will get, folks. We're using unopposed practices. So sometimes the volunteer or the volunteer coach, especially when we came back the first time, they were really nervous about, oh my God, how do I do practices or games with, are they allowed to tackle each other, or are they allowed to play, am I allowed to use opposition, etc., etc. So there's no opposition when it's the kid in the wall. So we're going to start at that level. So you will going to let the kids or adults find their feet when they come back onto the pitches for their sport. So again, simple little practices, and keep in your head, less is more. So the mirror practices here are playing with a buddy, nice and relaxed. The kids will set their own challenges. Obviously, us as coaches, as Phelim said earlier, you know, we do want them to learn the games and develop and be competent at the game. So we will have our plan, like Michal said, but the kids will be great teachers, because you will have seen in your group of kids, you'll have seen a marked improvement in a lot of kids from that self-practice that they are doing at home, you know, and that they will discover things, they will create things, they will imagine things when they're out in the back garden or against the wall or off the neighbor's wall. And they're coming back to probably show you as their coach, look at what I'm able to do, or look at where I'm at, okay? Other simple little setups, okay, this is the pairs practices. So we have four players working here, and that little white line down the middle, that's your COVID line. All right, so if you are anxious about, oh my God, they're too close to each other, they might bump into each other, etc., etc. It's just a little visual for the kids, and kids will have it in their head, or adults. So we don't need to be putting cones, ladders, hurdles, everything all around the place, because if we do, if we go with more equipment, this is what it's going to look like. But unfortunately, folks, one of the COVID guidelines says that you must sanitize every piece of equipment you use. So be flexible, be creative in how you plan your spaces, etc. Now, obviously, this third picture, it might be very young kids, and we're boxing off their areas so that the session is as safe as possible. But as the kids grow and as the kids are older, or they're adults, you know, make it easy on yourselves, folks. Don't be going out there with hundreds of pieces of equipment just because you did a few Zooms or you did a webinar or you saw Pep Guardiola do it. Okay, so we're trying to keep it as easy as possible for everyone when sport returns. And again, thanks to Shane Smith. If any of you are following on Twitter, if you follow Shane, Shane does a lot around this less is more and multi-sport. So here's some challenges for ourselves as coaches. So less frowns, more smiles, less intense, more relaxed. Unfortunately, and this is why I say that COVID was a bit of a pause for us all, there did start to develop this culture of the coach at all levels of sport. And we've seen it as recent as last night with this so-called Super League. And we saw it a week ago with the Monaghan footballers, and we saw it a week before that with the Dublin footballers. So that's the 2%, that's the minority, that's elite. We're here for the 98%, the majority. Okay, less structure, more chaos. All right, kids, adults, no matter what age, they just want to get out there, meet people, stretch the legs, get the heart rate up, and be involved in an activity. Less cues, more movement, less talking, more action. Okay, we're all sick of Zooms, we're all sick of courses. So when you're with the kids, brief introduction, chat to the kids, but you know, get that action up and running. All right, no laps, no lines, and no lectures. And again, sometimes, as Michal mentioned, too much equipment actually becomes a barrier for development. Okay, in that everything becomes more structured and automatic, and kids are nearly asking you as the coach, well, what do you want me to do here now, coach? And the example I always use on this is when Messi is dribbling past 6 or 7 players in the new camp, right? Is there anyone telling him what to do, or is he worried about his next move? He's just doing it naturally. He's just playing. Okay. Eventually, try and get away from the lines, and try and ensure that it looks chaotic, that it looks multi-directional. So I suppose in conclusion, what we're saying is let the kids find their feet when they come back in, and you coach then. Don't be nervous about kids bumping into each other, etc., etc. Just nice and steady. Start with small space practices, small numbers. Start with mirrors, and let the kids develop at their own rate, and then hopefully, as we return closer to competitive games and that, we'll be back to normality.
Thanks a million, Dennis. Thanks for that. Your line broke up a wee bit when we were going through.
My line is bad. Yeah, yeah, no bother, John. Yeah,
but thank you for that. We'll move on. So we'll move on to the next one, the next presentation, to finish off the kind of the organizing your session piece and talking about small-sided practice. We've got Jerry Casey, who is the Rugby Development Officer for North Munster, including Clare and Limerick, and he's working with Munster Rugby for the last 6 years. And his role encapsulates all levels of rugby, from minis to development squads at age grade level. So I'll let you take it away there, Jerry.
Thanks very much, John. Hi, everyone. As John said, I'm Jerry Casey, born and bred in Limerick, but living in Clare now in Northern Crusher, so I have a foot in both camps. I'm in Kilkee every summer as well, so might know a lot of you in the Clare area as well. As John said, my role goes from minis to adult rugby. We've been really lucky that our elite gamers went ahead, so we've been front and center in relation to TV and that. And I just love there what Dennis said about there's been a culture for the coach in the past couple of months, and now it's moved on to the kids, and it's hugely important that that they become front and center in relation to what we're going to do as coaches. So I'm just going to go through a few bits and pieces of what our pathway is going to be for the next, particularly 6 weeks. Okay, at the moment we have our regional development squads starting next week, all the elite kids, if you could call them at that level. But why we're doing this is because we want to go back to the participation, not performance. So the 98% of the kids that play sport for fun, and I think this transfers into all sport. It's been interesting listening to the previous presenters, that I think sport is sport. and coaches are coaches, and everything we all seem to have the same philosophy in relation to the sport we love. So for our point of view, we want to get rugby back on the pitch, the game that we love, the game that transfers into all other sports as well. And you can get skill development from all the sports and makes our sport better. One of the main reasons that I eventually picked, like every kid in Ireland played everything growing up, was rugby, was because the camaraderie part of it transferred into what I want to do in life. Always had fun with it, always enjoyed it. And the one thing I have to say for our rugby community, they have engaged completely in everything we've done online, but nothing beats a face-to-face. And as coaches, that's why we do it. It's all the face-to-face contact. It's the interacting with the kids, interacting with all the other adults, interacting with the coaches. It's why we do it, right? And let's be honest, guys, we have kids coming to us. So they're showing up week in, week out, coming to us as coaches. So it's up to us to actually give them an experience that's going to make them come back, as everyone else said. How do we do it? So all field sports are, if you describe them, it's all about the game. If I was to describe rugby to someone's never seen it, it's actually, I'd be saying, I want you to run forward by passing the ball backwards to score, okay? And there's someone else going to try and stop you. And 85% of that is what's going to happen in all the sports. Yeah, we have starting points, like when the ball goes out of play in rugby, we have a line out. If it goes out in soccer, it's a throw in or a line ball, whatever it is in all the other field sports. But it's all about playing the game. We have 4 cornerstones that we have in rugby that we think that if you're proficient with and actually coach it from minis through to adults, it makes a better game, a better player. They are catch, pass, tackle, ball carry evasion, and the breakdown. They're the 4 cornerstones of rugby. And I'm sure all other sports has cornerstones or key skills that they coach. But if you do it through the game and you organize your sessions and make a plan, like the other guys were saying, it's going to make it easier and more enjoyable as well. My attitude to this is, like, as a kid, I never went out and set up a drill on the street. We always played the game. Whether it was rugby, whether it was soccer, whether it was Wimbledon on, we got a rope across, we played tennis, we all did that. We played the game, and that's how we got better. And unfortunately, with life at the moment, kids don't have that the way culture has become. Like, life is all about rushing around now, and I suppose the one thing is COVID, we've actually taken a step back and seen what actually matters. So I'm actually seeing on the road, I'm actually seeing people, kids playing street soccer and all that, where I didn't before. But now we're going to come back to one-upping again. Us as coaches have to provide that when they come down to the club, to actually learn through the game. So what do we need to coach? In all sports, fundamental movement and athletic development has to come into consideration. But we can't just do drills, and Dennis said another euro there for you, Dennis, to get kids to enjoy it, okay? What we have at the moment is touch rugby. That's the only thing we can play. So in relation to athletic development and building up, hopefully, into contact, we have to use other mechanisms to get them ready for that. We've produced coach game and activity cards, which we actually use online. They're available on the phone for coaches as well, because we all think now the kids are visual. So if you have something on the side of your phone to actually show what the kid you want them to do, it makes it so much easier. I take in information visually. I always had, and I'm going to use visual aids here with video as well. I think the way life is now, kids do that all the time as well. And use the technology to make it easier for yourself. We also have a youth coaching module and all that kind of stuff available. The things you have to take in consideration as a coach is, what skills you want to develop? Like, what way do you want the kids to get something out of the session? Is it active? That's the first and foremost. Is it purposeful? Are the kids enjoying it? And is it safe? That's the 3 main things. We use that as the APES principle, which we'll go through later on. Okay, so what I'm going to show you is a game. You've all probably seen this, okay? It's just a warm-up activity and a small-sided practice that we can use. Now, as we were saying earlier on, your coaching eye here comes into it. This is not just a bit of fun. You can call this anything you want. It's called rats and rabbits here in the video. There's no sound, okay? So I'm going to speak through it. All you're trying to do here is observe what the kids can and can't do in a physical capacity. Unfortunately, you will actually have to coach some kids to do a sidestep. You will have to coach kids to get up off the ground in a dynamic manner. These are all things, and an activity like this will help you. It also makes it fun for the kids. What we have here is 2 little straight lines. One is called rabbits, one is called rats. And all Ray's there in the video is going to do, he's going to get the kids engaged, getting under the balls of their feet. He's going to call one of them. They're going to turn, accelerate away. You'll actually see him showing how to power away. And the other kid is going to try and catch. Now, there's so many different variations you can use in this to start the session, okay, in relation to this. We'd usually have a game before this, come back into this for some fundamental movement, and then we go back into a game with some skill development as well. And you'll see as we go along. You'll see here now what Ray is doing. Again, once you have this on, if you show this, this is so much easier to explain to people as well. So straight away, there's the rabbits putting up their hand, their rats, and all he's going to do is engage the kids. Now get them active. Little dummy call straight away. And you'll see the different levels of athletic ability of the kids in relation to, as Phelan was saying earlier on, some of these kids are developing at different stages. Some are big, strong kids. Some are small little kids. Some actually are trying to discover how to run properly. A prime example we have at the moment, you've all probably heard of a kid called Thomas Ahern who played full back for us up to 18. He grew 6 inches one summer and is now going to be an international second row. So you don't know what you have when you're coaching kids. And these are the things you have to take into consideration. Now Ray's actually has everyone face on, going to do a different variation again. So now they're actually sidestepping off the side of their foot and they're trying to catch again. As you can see, it's competitive aspect as well. The kids are getting involved. Everyone is active. This is a 3-minute drill. He's now going to put them on the ground. So now he's going to see the kids getting up off the ground. And he's watching this all the time. One of the main things in rugby is when you hit the ground, get up quickly again. So something like a dynamic burpee is something you can coach. Not at this age, but what you can do is build in things that's going to help them develop as well. We just take a look at this and then I'm going to move on as well. Because as I say, the one thing I'd always encourage as coaches is please use your imagination. If a kid comes along to a training session and a small-sided practice like this, and if you have cones set up there, cones there, they'll go, that's that drill, that's that drill, that's mom and dad's going to come home, and then off we go. Kids moving around, getting up off the ground. You can see their kids getting up on their knees, pushing their hands up. And these are things we actually have to develop as well. So now I'm going to go against myself in relation to a kind of a semi-drill, because when we have minis, sometimes you have to engage them, okay? It is literally like herding cats, and I want to give you some visual things to be able to help you along. Now, sport to sport, fun is fun. These two games are used by international rugby teams for everyone to have fun as well at the start of a session. Here we have a little game/drill, if I'm going to call it that. All of this is robbed in this. All you're doing is getting the kids accelerating. You're going to get them low, going through legs, and actually you can coach them then how to pick up the ball properly in rugby. Small little things like this. They're all engaged. They're all having fun. You see the excitement on their face, picking up the ball. And from a coaching idea, you'll see some kids stooping down, picking it up, not sweeping through. These are the things you have to absorb as a coach as well. It's not just about playing. Is that okay? You can develop it on, make it quicker, do different aspects of it. All these kind of things about using your imagination is what we're trying to encourage as coaches. Sorry, I'm just going to go back one. So the way we coach in rugby, and I suppose the one thing in the small-sided training sessions now in small-sided games is that years ago, if a coach rocked up the training and there could be 5 or 6 kids there, I've seen coaches calling training off. Whereas now we have to use that as a huge opportunity for skill development, to get more touches on the ball, to have more engagement with the kids, to get to know the kids. All those kind of things are going to make you a better coach. Keeping it simple, keeping it safe, making it fun and enjoyable. The next 6 weeks for all our sports are key that when come September, we have players and athletes coming back to our sport, no matter what it is, or to any sport. Otherwise, we're going to lose them. Listen to the kids, listen to the feedback, ask them, was it fun? I did an interesting thing a few years ago where I was videoed and mic'd up doing a training session for work, for a 60-minute session. And I actually spoke for 20 minutes. I couldn't believe it. I actually was asking kids questions and answering them as well. So it's an interesting thing to do when the kids actually give you some feedback, take it on board. Be positive, encourage and practice. And as always,
Is that me or has he gone?
He's
He's
gone.
gone, John. Yeah. He's paused.
Okay. Okay, what we might do so is we might move on to the last presentation because we could be sitting here indefinitely. Are you back, Jerry? No. Okay. So what we're going to do is, how do we get? Can we get rid of his screen now? Phelim, can you get? Oh yeah. There's Jürgen. Jürgen joining us. Jürgen, have you something to say? Okay. I'm good. Well, we'll move on to the last presentation. So, if everybody can still hear me, can somebody just give me a thing that they can hear me?
Yep.
Okay, great. Okay, so I think there's been a very common theme running through the whole presentation so far, from the very start, from Nullig talking about anxieties, coaches and athletes, and the whole theme coming through from Phelim and through and Liliane and the others in relation to the child-centered approach and making sure that it's a progressive return to sport. And I like what Jerry said there a few minutes ago, is the next 6 weeks are crucial for retention. And it's very important that we can re-engage the children in that safe manner. But as clubs and as coaches, you and we, because I coach as well, we have an obligation to society to make sure that we keep sport as safe as possible, and we lead in the way that we do that, even if it's just for the optics of the sport. Because one of the speakers mentioned, or I think it was Dennis mentioned, the Dublin and Monaghan footballers, and just that optic of them training. So we have a real optic to make sure that we are doing everything as sports organizations to ensure that we are doing everything in the right way. And that will take leadership from yourselves and from your clubs. And that leads into where Andy Burke from Blue Vista is going to speak to us. Andy's also involved in Kilrush Rugby Club, but Andy is an executive and leadership coach and the founder of Blue Vista. As a high performance coach, he works closely with those looking to enhance their authentic leadership skills so they can inspire and lead success within their organizations, their teams, and with their own personal goals. So I'll let Andy come into the fray here. If you can hear me, Andy.
I have, yeah. Thank you very much, John.
Great.
I'll just share my screen. You might just confirm then once it's up and running.
Yes, Andy, that's good.
Marvelous. Good evening, folks. It's always hard to take the night shift after what has been a fantastic group of speakers already so far. And I think John's point is very well made, as in we do have to get kids back onto the field, and we do need to engage them and bring back the fun element, but there is a real societal risk associated with what we're about to do. And what I really want to talk to you about tonight is about how do we lead through safety, how do we lead through this time and ensure that we can continue to keep our clubs open. Also, what I'd like to cover tonight is about actually talking to the kids themselves and creating a vision to those who do come back, that we're about to, that we're going to get back onto the field and work in a positive way, because some kids are going to be working well, as we've known already throughout the period, and others then are sitting on the fence whether or not they'll come back at all. So it's something we need to look at. Something that Liliane brought up in her survey, which I thought was really powerful, I'd just like to highlight it because it really does help in my brief, is that one of the girls surveyed said was, please obey the guidelines. Now that's really powerful, I believe, because that's already telling us before we ever hit the field what our kids want. They want to stay open. They want to stay on the field. Okay. So really, it's really from a leadership perspective is what I want to talk to you tonight about. So before we do that, I think it's important to highlight the difference between what we mean by management and what we mean by leadership. In many cases, they tend to become rolled up into one, and people believe they're the same thing, and they use them in different contexts. I can clearly tell you that they are different. And very briefly, I'd just like to highlight the differences in them. And if you look at the images that are in the management picture, you see cogs of a wheel, you see targets, profit lines, HR, timelines, money, that's all centered with running a club or running a team, running a business. Okay. And then just look at the leadership element, and you've got all those other aspects of it. So what we say about management is about doing things right. Okay. So we take complex situations, complex processes, and we try to simplify them to a point where it's easy for anybody to come in and run that complex process. Okay. So we're doing things right and doing it regularly right, so that brings stability to your club or to your process. So what are we talking about there? We're talking about the COVID risk assessments that have been prepared, the COVID safety plans that have been prepared for your clubs. Your committees and your national governing bodies have done some tremendous work in preparing and analyzing the risks and putting the mitigation measures in place, so that you can bring your team onto a field and conduct training, provided we follow the guidelines and the rules and regulations that are put in place. So they've taken what is a very serious and a very complex situation and have refined it to a series of steps like sanitizing the equipment, in and out routes, pods of 15, no overlapping team groups, all the things that we're very familiar with. They're there for an extremely, extremely good and important reason. Okay. And so that's management, but we need something more. We as coaches, and I'm a coach myself, so I understand the pain points that we have. We have to provide leadership and we have to provide guidance, not just to kids, but to everybody that is coming in contact with our training session, or with our group. Okay. That's from parents to club executives, to the kids themselves, to other coaches. Okay. We have to ensure that we do the right things. Okay. So management is doing things right to bring about stability and safety. Leadership is about doing the right things. So one of the great sayings is that, leadership is doing the right things at the right time, in the right way, for the right reason, even when nobody is watching. And I think that last piece is really poignant and important, because it comes back to having ethical leadership, doing and having integrity. So we don't just clean the equipment because we know there's kids or parents in the locality. As soon as you arrive in your grounds, you should really be living and using the guidelines and the safety precautions in place, because everything needs to be clean. So from now on, we have to wear masks when we arrive on the pitch. So we do that even when there's nobody around, particularly obviously when we're expecting people to come afterwards. And leadership is all about people. It's all about our kids. It's all about our interactions with parents. It's all about the interactions with other coaches. And just look at the words that are in that picture. Leading people, which is pretty obvious, okay, which means that we'll talk about vision later. It's coaching and supporting. It's looking forward and empowering people and trusting and shared vision and providing good example. Okay, leading by example is a key message I'd like you to take away from this brief. And I have a short saying, is do as I do. It's very simple, but it sort of resonates and it's easy to remember. Do as I do. And that's quite simple. So if you're a person that lives and manages those regulations all the time, even when nobody's watching, you're being a good leader and you inspire people. And again, Lilianne's brief brought inspiration into her, one of her points. And it ties also with Nolog, who talked about a growth mindset. And we'll talk about that in a few minutes. Okay, so leadership is something that is not, it's not devolved to the executive committee. It's not devolved to, captains of clubs and such important appointments like that. We all have a responsibility. We have a responsibility to our kids. We have a responsibility to provide safety to the club, to the parents, to the visitors, to the society, to the parish. Okay, so because we have to ensure that we keep both everybody safe and the reputation of the club and reputation of sport. And as the girls asked in Lilianne's survey, follow the guidelines and let's keep sport going. Okay, we have to take that approach. We have to take that leadership approach, and it can be uncomfortable. It can be uncomfortable to approach a person and say, please put on your mask. And if you don't put on your mask, I'm going to have to ask you to leave the grounds. Maybe somebody that's in the club 30, 40 years. But we have to take that stand for everybody's collective safety. So we put together this framework on what that means in a COVID environment. How do we lead in a COVID environment? And an easy way to remember it. And I've broken it down into 4 areas. And the first one is learn it, explain it, apply it, and do it. Okay. So like I've mentioned, each club will have a COVID safety plan. It will have a very detailed risk assessment associated with that. So make sure, if you haven't yet done so, find it, read it, and understand it. Understand the regulations that you are required to put in place from a governmental level, but also imposed on the club in order to keep everybody safe. That's the bottom line here. So learn it, know what they are, and also be aware that they do change. Okay, so in this current round of level 3 that's upcoming, there are some subtle changes, I believe, to some of the regulations being enforced. So make sure you know them. And there's a great saying too, that you don't ever really know something unless you can explain it to somebody. And that's step 2. Make sure you explain it to kids in a way kids will understand, of course. Make sure you explain it to parents or any visitors. Say, look, these are the rules, these are the regulations, and they must be followed. Everybody must follow them. And it's for your safety, your kids' safety. Apply the rules and regulations, put them into force. Make sure that they're adhered to by everybody. Okay, don't do things in half measures. Don't think the kids won't be here for half an hour, so I don't need any of that. I don't need to sanitize my hands when I'm putting out the kit. I don't need to wear my mask. You know, that's the time when perhaps you could potentially infect some area. Okay, so it's not just when there's people around. And don't just half do it. Apply all the rules. And the last one is do it. Be a COVID safety champion for your team, for your club, for your parish, for the counties. Okay, if we all do that, if all our clubs can manage to keep this out of our clubs, it not only keeps our clubs safe, it keeps our parishes and towns safe and our counties safe, it also keeps society safe. All right, so this is how we suggest that you lead. Learn it, explain it, apply it, and do it. The next piece I'd just like to talk about then, and leadership comes in a number of ways. And one of the things that we believe right now, and as Jerry mentioned about the 6 weeks, the best thing to do for now in the early phase of our return is to create a vision for kids, but also create a vision for parents. And that vision is a journey. It's an objective where we want to get to, which is playing full competitive matches in the near future. We don't know when that's going to be, but that shouldn't stop us having that vision. And if we can create that vision within our kids and our teams and our parents, we can inspire them to stay involved, to turn up to training, and fun is a key part of that. So if the vision is keep coming to training, we're going to have loads of games, we're going to have loads of fun, you're going to become leaner, you're going to become more engaged, your skills are going to come back up, and in the future, not too distant away, we're going to get back to matches. And we continue to reinforce that vision. Okay. It's very interesting what Jerry put up there about the Munster branches view to training, the why, the how, and the what. In a lot of cases, unfortunately, we operate in the opposite way around. We talk about, we're going to do a kicking drill tonight when we go to training. This is how we're going to do it. This is what it's going to look like. We're going to play, a bit of a game and have some solo kicking, and we're going to do it so the kids can have some fun and get out on the pitches and stay engaged. We need to start thinking the opposite way as leaders, and we need to communicate that through the vision and start saying the reason we're going back to sport is to give kids fun and active engagement with their peers, and also obviously to keep the club alive and all that goes with that with the sport. We're going to do it by training 2 nights a week and having fun and playing games. And the what is, these are the games we're going to play, and this is how long we're going to do it for. Okay, so it's Simon Sinek, who's a real thought leader in the leadership space, has loads of YouTube clips around this thing called the Golden Circle, and it's exactly that. Okay, it is worth watching and getting to know that. Okay, so create a vision, and with that vision, you need to create also some objectives, and this could be for your coaching team and maybe even for the group. And I think some of the speakers earlier talked about letting the kids help to pick the goals. So what do you want to achieve in the next 6 weeks? What do you want to achieve in 3 months? What do you want to achieve by the end of whatever season or prepare for the new season? Okay, so have goals, because any vision without a plan is a dream. Okay, so have a vision, communicate it, and also have some sort of markers for people to achieve. Lastly, then, what I'd like to talk about is you need to create that inspiration in your team. You're going to get and Nola mentioned it earlier, a lot of anxiety about my skill levels have dropped. I'm a lot bigger now than I was. And some of those will become self-limiting beliefs for some of these kids. And we need to get them to change their lens or how they look at themselves. And we do that by inspiring confidence in them that, you know, through our plan, through our vision, through our fun, we're going to move to, you know, this better place that you want to be. And we also want to create this belief that, you know, through sport, you know, particularly with parents, that the kids are better off coming to sport. They're much better off because we have our COVID guidelines. We have all our safety plans in place. We're champions and leaders in providing safe environments for our children. And it's the best place for the kids to be, both safety-wise and from their professional and mental nurturing perspective. Okay, so provide inspiration, provide vision, provide some goals, and generally be a leader in terms of safety for your club, for all interests of all of us. So that's pretty much me. Thank you very much for your attention, and the very best of luck getting back on the pitches. Well done.
Thanks a million, Andy. That was very inspirational. And Andy's again was with bluevista.ie. You can check out the company, and thanks a million for coming on board. Jerry, I know Jerry has just come back into the fray. His internet crashed. Jerry, do you want to just say a couple of words instead of going through the rest of the presentation? Just a couple of words.
Yeah, it actually was a full power cut, not even internet, believe it or not. It says someone from Limerick was peed off me talking to Clare people a lot. So yeah, listen, sorry about that, guys. If anyone wants to contact me through the sports partnership, absolutely. But y'all have my number in relation to rugby clubs. The one thing I'd like to emphasize is that kids learn skill development through games, no matter what sport you're in. I can coach. I'd actually be confident enough to coach anybody who has never picked up a rugby ball how to pass a ball technically properly. But the skill of actually implementing that through in a game at pace under pressure, that's what sport is about. And that's what sport is about in every sport we play. The more games we play, first of all, the more engaged kids will become, but they learn. Everyone has spoken tonight about let the chaos, be comfortable in the chaos. I'm a great believer in that as well. The next 6 weeks, embrace chaos, embrace the fun, embrace the mayhem you're going to have around you, because it's the one thing that I've missed throughout COVID is actually interacting and actually seeing kids develop, both kids and adults develop through sport. It's the best thing we have, I think, in the community. And the more we all embrace as coaches, the better it's going to be. Thanks again, John.
Thanks a million, Jerry, for that. Now I know we're a bit over time, and thanks for those of you that stayed on. Again, this is recorded, so it will be made available on our websites afterwards, and we'll email out the link as well. If anybody wants to type in a few questions, I know there was one or two there. Jess, have you anything coming up for us there? Just for a couple of minutes, we'll do a couple of questions and answers, and then people are free to come and go as they wish. Is Jess still with us? Jess must be gone, is she?
No, Jess is there, just logging in.
Oh yeah, just as Jess is logging in there, I'd really like to thank all the speakers. I think it's been very, very insightful, and I hope that you have got, you've got something from it. I certainly have, and there's lots of things to think about, and just to echo what Andy was saying at the end, it's very much about us as coaches leading the way and making sure we're doing the right thing at the right time in the right way and all that, and not just doing it right, but making sure that we are doing it, and that we're keeping our, because if we do it right, we're keeping our schools open, we're keeping society open. It's not just keeping sport open, we're keeping a lot of other things open as well. And and it is, I know we're probably all sick of hearing it as well, but it's tentative times, it's different times, and all the cliches and that. But if we can just play our part, and we can do our part in keeping the society and keeping everything else open along with our sport, which is vitally important. Jess, no, you're on mute there, Jess. Like we have to get a t-shirt for some people saying you're on mute. No, I still can't hear. I see one here. Are coaches to wear a mask when coaching outdoors? I see a chat and a question down there from somebody. I think that was a point that you brought up yourself, Andy. You're saying about coaches coming into the ground wearing masks.
Yeah, maybe Jerry can boast of this, but certainly in the rugby community, the guidelines that have been issued out now, and this was one of the changes that we've been informed about since the last time we reopened, was that it is now mandatory for all coaches to wear a mask when out on the field. I can't necessarily speak for every other organization, field sports, but certainly, and again, I'd ask Jerry to back me up if I'm right, is that in rugby, yes, we have to wear masks now at all times.
No, you're right, Andy. It's one of the protocols they found from transferring from the internationals, is that listen, it's a bit strange when you see international coaches sitting up in the stand and wearing masks, but it's one of the things they're going to stipulate that all coaches, both at club level and provincial level, will wear. And I think I won't be definitive, but I think it is going to transfer into the other sports as well, from what we're hearing.
I just see a comment there that it's not under the FAI protocols at the moment unless you're treating a child with an injury, but we'll watch this space, Jerry. I think that's what you're kind of saying there. Jess, anything else coming there? No, still can't hear you. So,
John, there was just one there I think came through about an indoor sport, and maybe
when is the returning?
Yeah, maybe people could be a little bit creative, and you know, I give the futsal example of the primary school program we did with yourselves, where futsal traditionally would be an indoor sport, but we've managed to roll it out in some shape or form in the outdoor schoolyards, you know. So maybe something like basketball could be played on the outdoor courts, rugby indoors. Jerry will have them out playing tag rugby, you know. So because indoor sports will not be returning, I would think, for a while yet. So maybe people should look at that opportunity of trying to bring their sport outdoor in some shape or form.
Thanks, Dennis. I just see one there from another participant. It's up to coaches to lead by example. The cognitive learning states, monkey see, monkey do. Yeah, that's a good point, I think. We see how to bridge the gap from non-contact training to competitive matches. Anybody got any thoughts on that?
I suppose there are little models, game models, where you would use zonal spaces so that you can play that 4-a-side game or that 5-a-side game. The players are still restricted into their zones. So that is kind of a stepping stone from non-contact into contact.
Thanks, Dennis. Here's one for maybe Phelim. I'll just bring Phelim in. I'm a bit confused with restrictions. So is social distance mandatory during training session? If so, how to manage small kids?
Yeah, so you know, that's where some people are kind of a little bit confused in relation to the return to sport. You know, over the various lockdowns, we've gone through various formats, from small pods of 5 to groups outside of 15 in that safe environment. The only stipulation in relation to our outdoor sports is that it's non-contact, you know, that we're in that close proximity of tackling and engaging with each other during our sports. But social distancing is obviously not really possible in that outdoor space. But because the kids are outdoors and because they're moving and all of that, I mean, the way they've been looking at it is that, you know, a close contact is 15 minutes or more in a very enclosed space with a particular person. So for us, we're in this outdoor space. You're only going to have little short breaks for water breaks, etc., and a little bit of short break for instruction. And generally, you're keeping them moving all the time. The reason the pods are allowed in relation to 15s is managing that piece of not really being in big huddles and big collective pieces. So it's really about, as the guys showed in their descriptive sessions, that they have grids set up, they've organized. So you split your groups up and you get them moving around. And it's not to be paranoid about, little kids coming into contact with each other. You're going to have to be mindful of it, that it's not continuous and over a longer period of time, but for little short interactions, because they're engaging in the school, they're engaging in the schoolyard. And a lot of the time, the kids in our clubs are predominantly coming from the same school environment. So it is okay in that space. But that's why they've taken the contact out of it, so that they're not really in that engaged space.
Thanks, Phelim. And I should mention that on, is it Sunday evening or Monday, Phelim, the Sport Ireland return to sport training?
Yes, and I suppose, people are going to be saying, God, could it not be out sooner? And the reality is, as Andy mentioned as well, everything is changing all the time. So the new e-learning course is coming out as close to the return to sport as possible, in case there are any additional changes, suggestions, etc. And they're constantly staying, up to date in that space. So that very simple workshop e-learning course will be out, available. It possibly could be out tomorrow, but if not, it'll definitely be out early next week.
And we'll have it up on our websites and social media, and that we'll be sharing that.
Yeah.
There's a couple of more. I'm conscious of the time here. Catherine asks, when might we get a copy of the recording? We'd hope to send out the recording when we get the link, so I'll tidy it up on that tomorrow, hopefully, and you can share it within your club, and that, and we'll have it up on our website. There's a question here: thoughts on children going back to multi-sports in the same week? And do you want to take that one?
Yeah, again, that for me is about that training load, and don't overcook them. This is where that huge communication piece between coaches is going to be so important in relation to what our kids actually doing in our weeks. And, that's something that we should be doing, whether we're in COVID or not. It's something we have to be mindful in relation to multi-sports across clubs, but also multi-sports across the school environment. So it's that communication piece. And it goes back to my points from earlier as well about that personal and social piece, is about knowing your kids and knowing what they've been doing, and trying to be mindful that if we overload them really soon into this return to play, we are going to cause injuries, we are going to have setbacks for the young people. Whereas what every speaker has really reinforced this evening is, we got to take them through a gradual process that keeps them on the pitches. And that is from a COVID compliant perspective, but it's also from an injury perspective, and that gradual progressive improvement in both fitness and sport skill acquisition over the next 6-7 weeks.
And I think that's a lovely point to leave it on, Phelim. And again, if you have any other questions, you can email us, email either of the sports partnerships.
I have a tiny little video, John, if you indulge me for a second to play, because I think it'll encapsulate what we want the whole thing to be about. So hopefully this will work, John. It's going to take about 30 seconds.
Yeah, just 1 second, Phelim, okay? Just wait, just before you play that, in case people want to drop off, right?
Yeah.
I just want to thank all the speakers. So yourself, Phelim, from Limerick Sports Partnership. I'd like to thank Jess O'Keefe from Clare Sports Partnership, our club development officer here, for helping setting up all this and doing the surveys. Nolik O'Sullivan from myperformance.ie, Lillian O'Hora from Athletics Ireland, Michal Duffy from Clare GEA, Dennis Hines from the FEI, Jerry Casey from Munster Rugby, and Andy Burke from bluevista.ie. And to all yourselves as well for actually attending here and staying on for so long. We did run a little bit over, but if you saw the mess we had with technology about 45 minutes before you started, you may not have been here at all. So thank you, everybody. Phelim, take it, roll it there, Colette, as you say yourself.
Yeah, so I think we were very jealous earlier in the week when we seen the return to sport in Northern Ireland, and one of the clubs put up this in relation to what it actually all means and what it's about. So again, thanks to everybody for logging on this evening. And you know where we are, so make sure you follow up with us in any way we can in both these sports partnerships. So this should be us going out. This is what it's about. Some of them forgot their hurleys.
Heartwarming stuff. Thanks a million, Phelim.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks very much.
Thanks very much. Bye now.